It's small, lightweight, often lost in the couch cushions, abandoned in tip jars, or cast aside in the street. A single cent, 1 penny. But don't let its size fool you, because this humble coin, this sliver of copper, has carried the weight of nations, witnessed revolutions, survived wars, sparked economic debates, and held the faces of presidents and empires. The 1-cent coin is more than just spare change. It is history, struck in metal. Long before America had global power, long before the dollar became a world standard, there was the cent, a coin meant to bring economic stability to a young, fragile republic. It was a bold idea, a national coinage system, standardized, democratic, and uniquely American. And it all began with one small coin. In 1793, in the fledgling United States, the first official cent was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. It bore no image of a king, no symbol of a crown, no sign of monarchy. Instead, it featured liberty. This was more than a design decision. It was a declaration. The early cent became a coin of rebellion and of vision. It represented the values the country was founded on: freedom, self-governance, and equality. Unlike European coins of the time, which depicted monarchs, America's cent bore the image of liberty, a female personification of the ideals this new republic held dear. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the cent had real buying power. A loaf of bread, a newspaper, a cup of coffee, all could be had for a few cents. The coin was a daily companion. In every pocket, every till, every handshake of commerce. It was ordinary and extraordinary. But making a national coinage wasn't easy. The US Mint had to overcome technological limitations, fluctuating copper prices, and the skepticism of a public used to foreign and state-issued money. Yet, the cent prevailed, not just as a means of transaction, but as a symbol of identity. Over the centuries, the cent has worn many faces and told many stories. Each new design has marked a chapter in the American journey, a mirror of the times, a record in metal, from the stern gaze of Abraham Lincoln to the delicate feathers of the flying eagle, from the wheat stalks of the Depression era to the memorial that honors a nation's 16th president. Even in wartime, the cent adapted. When copper was needed for bullets and shells during World War II, the US issued steel. Pennies, a reminder that no symbol is immune to the demands of history. Today, the cent faces new challenges. Critics call it obsolete, a drain on taxpayers, a relic of the past. Others defend it fiercely, citing tradition, charity, and the psychological power of pricing. But whether loved or loathed, the penny endures. Year after year, millions more are minted. Billions remain in circulation, a quiet testament to a nation's continuity. So what makes the 1-cent coin so powerful? Not its metal content, not its face value, but its place in our pockets, our memories, our milestones. From a child's first savings jar to the ceremonial lucky penny, the cent has imprinted itself in culture and conscience. Heads or tails, luck or fate, the penny has always been more than a coin. It's a storyteller. It's a witness. It's a survivor. And over the next half hour, we'll follow its journey. From colonial America to modern debates. From copper mines to digital vaults. From pockets to presidential portraits. This is the story of the 1-cent coin. A story of small change with a mighty legacy. Before the American Revolution. Before the Declaration of Independence. Before the Stars and Stripes flew over a single fort, there was chaos. Not in the streets, but in commerce. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the American colonies lived in a world without standardized money. Barter was common. Animal hides, bushels of wheat, even tobacco leaves served as currency. But when coins were used, they came from all over: British pounds, Spanish reales, Dutch guilders, Portuguese escudos. Coins from distant lands made their way into colonial tills, worn smooth from decades of circulation. The most popular coin in the colonies? It wasn't British. It was the Spanish silver dollar, cut into pieces to make small change. That's where the phrase 2 bits comes from. But for daily, smaller transactions, colonists desperately needed something else: a low-value, widely accepted copper coin, a 1-cent equivalent. And so, The search for small change gave rise to a fascinating, chaotic era, the age of colonial coppers. Between the 1650s and the late 1700s, several colonies and private minters took matters into their own hands. They struck their own copper coins, often without royal approval. These weren't technically legal tender, but they were necessary, and in many places, widely trusted. In New Jersey, a coin bearing a horse's head and plow became a symbol of hard work and independence. In Connecticut, copper cents with a bust of Liberty stood as quiet protest against British rule. And in Massachusetts, the only colony officially authorized to mint coins by its own charter, we see one of the earliest American coins, the 1652 pine tree shilling. Though not copper and not a cent, the pine tree coin showed something radical, that a colony could mint its own money. A bold assertion of economic sovereignty. London didn't take kindly to this. The Crown viewed independent coinage as rebellion, an affront to centralized power. As a result, many colonial coppers were declared illegal, debased, or banned outright. But the people kept using them. Why? Because they had no other choice. For ordinary Americans, coins were practical tools, not political statements. If a Connecticut copper could buy a mug of ale, it had value. Then came 1787, and with it, one of the most remarkable coins in American history, the Fugio cent, the first official coin authorized by the Continental Congress, and likely designed by none other than Benjamin Franklin himself. It was quirky, symbolic, and unmistakably American. The Fugio cent carried two messages: mind your business, an early version of work hard and prosper, and we are one, a reminder that the new states must remain united. More than a medium of exchange, the Fugio cent was a message, struck in copper, aimed at the soul of a fractured nation. But the Fugio cent was short-lived, less than a year in circulation, and soon forgotten in the flurry of post-revolutionary instability. Still, it set a precedent. America needed a national coin. One currency, one system, one mint. Enter Alexander Hamilton, the nation's first Secretary of the Treasury. He understood what the colonies had lacked, a uniform monetary system. In his financial plan for the young republic, Hamilton emphasized the need for a national mint to strike coins that reflected the new government's stability and vision. And at the heart of that vision was the cent. The stage was set. The lessons of the colonial coppers were clear. People needed small, reliable coinage. And in 1792, the United States Congress passed the Coinage Act, establishing the U.S. Mint and authorizing the production of several denominations, including the 1-cent coin. A year later, the first official United States cent, the 1793 chain cent, rolled off the presses in Philadelphia. It was no longer colonial, no longer provisional. It was American, and it would spark over 2 centuries of coinage history. The year is 1793. George Washington is in his second term as president. The ink on the Constitution is still fresh, and the American experiment, bold, new, uncertain, is just beginning to take shape. But if a nation is to stand, it must have more than ideals. It needs infrastructure, institutions, and perhaps most importantly, currency. In a modest brick building in Philadelphia, the first steps toward a unified American currency system were taking place. Authorized by the Coinage Act of 1792, the United States Mint was established to bring order to the chaos of early American commerce. And among its first responsibilities, striking the 1-cent coin. This wasn't the high-tech, automated minting process we know today. No steam presses, no computers. The first coins were made with elbow grease, rudimentary tools, and a passionate belief in the new republic. And in March of 1793, the very first U.S. cent rolled off the presses, the chain cent. It was large, nearly the size of today's $half, pure copper, bold in design. On the obverse, a youthful Liberty with flowing hair. On the reverse, a simple chain with 15 interlocking links, representing the 15 states of the Union. But despite its symbolism, the chain cent was met with public criticism. To many, the chain was not a symbol of unity, but of oppression, slavery, tyranny. The design struck the wrong tone for a nation built on freedom. So, later that same year, the Mint responded. The chain design was replaced by the wreath cent, with a more elegant wreath on the reverse and a slightly refined Liberty on the front. And though public opinion improved, controversy wasn't over. Critics claimed the Liberty bust looked unkempt, even frightful. It wasn't the classical elegance Americans had hoped for. Still, the coin marked a monumental achievement, the birth of official American coinage. The design was the work of Henry Voigt, a clockmaker, inventor, and patriot. Voigt had no formal artistic training, but he carried the vision of a new republic in his hands. With limited tools and resources, he helped forge the foundation of America's coinage system. The next few years saw rapid changes in the cent's design. In 1794, the Liberty cap cent appeared, with Liberty facing right and wearing a soft freedom cap, a nod to ancient Roman ideals of liberty and citizenship. Then came the draped bust cent in 1796, featuring a more refined, neoclassical image of liberty, designed in part by famous portrait artist Gilbert Stuart and engraved by Robert Scott. These weren't just artistic updates. Each redesign represented a growing sense of national identity, a young country trying to find its visual language, its symbols, its face. But making sense wasn't easy. Copper prices fluctuated wildly. Procuring high-quality copper planchets was a logistical nightmare. And unlike silver or gold, copper coins had to be made in high volume just to circulate widely. To make matters worse, the Mint had to shut down production multiple times due to lack of materials or equipment failures. Still, the Mint pressed on. Between 1793 and 1857, the US continued to produce what would later be called large cents, hefty copper coins that dominated everyday transactions. Some of these early cents are now legendary in the world of numismatics. The 1799 cent, for example, is one of the rarest and most valuable of the early dates. Few were struck, and even fewer survive today. These coins are more than relics. They're the fingerprints of America's earliest ambitions, raw, imperfect, but unmistakably visionary. The birth of the US cent marked more than the creation of a coin. It marked a declaration that the United States would stand on its own, not only in governance and military, but in commerce, with a monetary system all its own. And at the heart of that system, right from the beginning, was the cent. From the start, the 1-cent coin was never static. It evolved, sometimes gracefully, sometimes awkwardly, mirroring the growth of a young, restless republic. Each redesign didn't just change a coin. It told a story about America's shifting identity, values, and aspirations. And at the center of it all was liberty. For over half a century, liberty was the undisputed star of the cent, but she came in many forms. In 1793, she appeared as a windswept rebel, with unkempt hair flying free, a visual metaphor for the revolution that had just passed. But the public, still holding on to classical ideals of beauty, found her too wild. So in 1794, the Mint introduced the Liberty cap design. Liberty now faced right, and on her head sat the Phrygian cap, a Roman symbol of freedom worn by emancipated slaves. This was liberty as the new republic wanted to be seen, determined, yet refined, idealistic, but grounded in ancient tradition. Then came the draped bust in 1796, influenced by painter Gilbert Stuart. This version of liberty looked more aristocratic, almost European, a curious choice for a nation that had just broken away from monarchy. But this liberty was dignified, confident, a symbol of a country asserting itself on the world stage. The design was engraved by Robert Scott, the Mint's first chief engraver, who would go on to shape many of America's early coin icons. Still, the large cent size and appearance drew criticism over the decades. By the 1820s, coins were often heavy, dark, and difficult to carry in bulk. Throughout the early 1800s, Liberty's look was repeatedly updated, from the classic head to the matron head. And finally, the braided hair cent, introduced in 1839. Each iteration brought smoother lines, softer features, and subtle improvements in minting technology. But these designs also reveal something deeper, a desire to present liberty, and by extension, America, as mature, composed, and enduring. By the mid-1800s, however, a different problem loomed: economics. The price of copper was rising, and the large cent, once practical, had become expensive to produce and bulky to use. It was time for a change. In 1856, the mint unveiled a radical solution: the Flying Eagle cent, a smaller, lighter coin made from a copper-nickel alloy. It weighed just 4.67 grams, less than half the weight of the old large cents. The obverse still bore liberty, stylized as a small, simple wreath, but the reverse was bold, a soaring eagle, wings spread in flight. It was patriotic, powerful, modern, and for the first time in American coinage, an actual animal appeared, not as a shield, not as a symbol, but as the centerpiece. Only a small number of 1856 Flying Eagle cents were produced as test pieces. Today, they're among the most sought-after coins in US numismatics. But in 1857, the design went into full circulation. The large cent, a staple of American pockets for over 60 years, was officially retired. In its place, a new generation of cents began. Smaller, more economical, better suited to the fast-paced, industrializing America of the mid-19th century. The Flying Eagle was more than a new coin. It was a symbol of motion, of the nation's forward momentum. But its reign was brief. Minting problems plagued the Flying Eagle die, especially the fine details of the feathers and wreaths. Strikes were often weak, and so, after just 2 years in circulation, it was retired. In 1859, the mint introduced what would become one of the most iconic cent designs in history, the Indian head cent. And once again, the story of the 1-cent coin would take a bold new turn. For over a century, liberty had graced the face of the 1-cent coin. Her image, in many forms, symbolized the ideals of a young republic. But in 1909, the United States broke with tradition, dramatically, permanently. For the first time in American history, a real person would appear on a circulating coin. And not just any person. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president, the great emancipator, the man who preserved the Union during its darkest hour. In 1909, on the centennial of Lincoln's birth, his image was chosen to represent the 1-cent coin. It was a revolutionary move. The idea came from President Theodore Roosevelt, a reform-minded leader who saw American coinage as artistically uninspired. He wanted coins to reflect the nobility and greatness of the nation, like the ancient Greeks and Romans had once done. So Roosevelt turned to a sculptor, Victor David Brenner. Brenner had previously sculpted a plaque of Lincoln based on the president's early photographs. Roosevelt admired it and insisted it become the basis of a new coin. Thus, the Lincoln cent was born. When it was released in August 1909, the Lincoln cent was an instant sensation. People lined up outside banks. Children begged their parents for one. Collectors hoarded them. It was more than a coin. It was a tribute, a memorial in metal. But controversy erupted almost immediately. Brenner's initials, VDB, were prominently placed on the reverse. Some critics felt they were too bold, too self-promoting. Public outcry ensued. The mint quickly removed the initials, making the 1909 SVDB one of the rarest and most sought-after pennies in history. Struck at the San Francisco Mint, the 1909 VDB had a mintage of just 484,000 coins. Today, a pristine example can sell for thousands, making it one of the crown jewels of American cent collecting. But the real legacy of the Lincoln cent lies not in scarcity, but in longevity. For over 100 years, it has been the face of the penny. No other US coin has featured the same individual for so long. The Lincoln cent saw America through the Great Depression, 2 world wars, the Civil Rights Movement, and the Digital Revolution. It changed subtly, but always kept Lincoln's solemn gaze. In 1959, for Lincoln's 150th birthday, the reverse design was changed from wheat stalks to the Lincoln Memorial, making it the first US coin to feature the same person on both sides. Yes, if you look closely at the memorial, you'll see Lincoln's statue inside. A coin within a coin. A tribute within a tribute. The Lincoln penny became more than currency. It became part of American life. A lucky coin. A symbol of honesty. a tool for learning math, a reminder of sacrifice. Its very existence became a point of national pride. Even in wartime, the Lincoln cent adapted. In 1943, with copper reserved for ammunition, the mint produced pennies made of zinc-coated steel. Shiny and silver-like, they were unlike anything Americans had seen before, but they rusted easily, and they were confused with dimes. So in 1944, copper cents returned, this time made from recycled shell casings from the battlefield. Year after year, decade after decade, the Lincoln cent kept circulating. Presidents came and went. Technologies changed. But the humble penny, with Lincoln's steadfast face, remained a constant. In 2009, to mark Lincoln's 200th birthday, the US Mint released 4 special reverse designs, each commemorating a stage of his life: his birth and early childhood in Kentucky, his formative years in Indiana, his rise as a lawyer and legislator in Illinois, and his presidency in Washington. Together, they told a story of a man and a nation rising from humble beginnings. In the end, the Lincoln cent is more than just a coin. It's a monument, not made of marble, but of metal. Not built for the elite, but for everyone. A tiny tribute to one of America's greatest leaders, carried in the pockets of everyday people, every single day. The world was at war. Again. By the early 1940s, the United States had entered the global conflict that would define a generation, World War II. And while tanks rolled across Europe and ships patrolled the Pacific, America's factories roared to life. Victory would be forged not just on the battlefield, but on the home front. Copper, the very metal used in pennies, became critical to the war effort. It was needed for ammunition, communication cables, weaponry. Every ounce mattered. And so, in 1943, for the first time in US history, the iconic 1-cent coin changed its metal. Meet the 1943 steel cent, a penny like no other. Struck from zinc-coated steel. It was lighter in color, lighter in weight, and completely devoid of copper. It looked more like a dime than a cent. And for Americans, already adjusting to war rationing, it was just one more change in daily life. At first, people were fascinated. The steel penny was bright, silvery, and completely different. Some thought it futuristic. Others, confusing it with foreign coins, were skeptical. But almost immediately, problems began. The new coins rusted easily. The zinc coating wore off with circulation, exposing the steel underneath to moisture and corrosion. Worse yet, they were magnetic, sticking to vending machine parts and causing mechanical malfunctions. And to many Americans, they just didn't feel right. They lacked the comforting, familiar weight and tone of the old copper pennies. Steel cents confused coin-operated machines, misread as dimes, rejected as fakes. Even banks had trouble counting and sorting them efficiently. Still, the decision was necessary. Copper had to go where it was most urgently needed, the front lines. And so, more than 1 billion steel cents were minted. In 1943, a staggering number, even by today's standards. They circulated widely, fulfilling their temporary role with patriotic purpose. But by 1944, the mint quietly returned to copper coins. Only this time, they used a special source, recycled shell casings from the battlefield. These victory cents of 1944 and 1945 carried a powerful symbolism, made from the very materials used to defend the nation. These coins had a slightly different hue, not quite the deep brown of pre-war cents, but a lighter, almost golden appearance. To many, they were more than coins. They were medals, tokens of survival, tiny memorials in your pocket. But among all the wartime cents, none are as rare or as mysterious as the 1943 bronze cent. A handful of coins, perhaps, no more than a dozen, were mistakenly struck in the old copper alloy due to leftover planchets in the press. These coins were never meant to exist, but today, they're among the most valuable coins in American history. 1943. Bronze Lincoln cent sold at auction for over $1 million. When you're holding a 1943 bronze penny, you're holding an accident. That became a legend. The war changed everything: politics, industry, families, and even the humble penny. In just 1 year, the cent was transformed from a symbol of economic stability into a wartime artifact. The steel penny reminds us that even the smallest object can reflect the weight of history. It's not just a coin. It's a capsule, a flash of light from a time when every citizen was called upon to sacrifice, adapt, and serve.